Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried, no matter how far you run or how long you hide. Willa Sorn learned that the hard way on a cold October night in the Blue Ridge Mountains. She'd been alone up there for nearly 20 years, keeping to herself and asking no questions of the world. Then a rainstorm sent her to the barn, and she found a barefoot teenage girl hiding in the shadows. The girl was shaking, silent, and clearly running from something. Willa figured she was just another runaway looking for shelter. But when the girl finally spoke, the words that came out of her mouth reached straight into a life Willa thought nobody knew about. What could this stranger possibly know? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But let's go back a bit. Let's go back to understand how a woman ends up alone on a mountain for 20 years, and why a barefoot girl in her barn could shake the foundations of everything she'd built. Willa Sorn woke every morning at 5:30, winter or summer, rain or shine. Her internal clock had long ago adjusted to the rhythm of the mountains, to the particular quality of pre-dawn silence that settled over the ridges like a blanket. On this particular October morning, 3 days before the girl would appear, she rose from her narrow bed and dressed in the dark. Thermal underwear first, then wool socks, flannel shirt, canvas work pants. The cabin held the night's chill, and her breath made small clouds in the air as she moved through the familiar routine. The cabin itself was modest. One main room serving as kitchen, dining area, and living space, with a stone fireplace taking up most of the north wall. A smaller bedroom off to the side, and a bathroom she'd added herself 10 years back, complete with a composting toilet and a gravity-fed shower that pulled water from the spring uphill. Propane for cooking, wood for heat, solar panels for the minimal electricity she used. Everything built or improved by her own hands, slowly, carefully, over 2 decades of solitary living. She started the fire first, coaxing flame from last night's coals with kindling and patience. Then coffee, strong and black, in the old percolator that had been one of her first purchases when she'd arrived here with almost nothing. She stood at the kitchen window, mug warming her palms, and watched the sky lighten over the eastern ridge. This was her favorite moment of every day. The world suspended between darkness and light, belonging to neither. Full of possibility, the property consisted of 43 acres of mixed hardwood forest, rocky outcrops, and a small clearing where the cabin and barn stood. She'd bought it for cash 20 years ago from a man who'd inherited it and wanted nothing to do with mountain living. Back then, there'd been only a hunting shack, half collapsed, and the barn in slightly better condition. She'd lived in the barn that first winter while she rebuilt the cabin, and she still remembered how the cold had seeped into her bones, how she'd wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake, but she hadn't. This place had saved her life in all the ways that mattered. Her daily routine varied little with the seasons, only adjusted. In summer, the garden demanded attention. In fall, wood had to be split and stacked, food preserved, the cabin winterized. Winter meant snow removal, careful management of resources, long evenings by the fire. Spring brought repair work, preparation for planting, and the satisfaction of having survived another year. Today's tasks began with checking the solar battery bank, noting the charge level. Then out to the barn to tend the chickens. 8 hens that provided eggs year-round and occasionally ended up in the soup pot when they stopped laying. She scattered feed, collected 4 eggs, spoke to the birds in the low conversational tone she'd developed for talking to animals. They clucked and fussed, unconcerned with her presence, and she found their simple demands comforting. The barn also housed her tools, neatly organized on pegboard walls. A workbench ran along one side, scarred from years of use. Above it, shelves held jars of nails, screws, bolts, all sorted by size. She'd learned early that organization mattered when you lived this far from town, when a missing tool could mean the difference between a quick repair and a day-long problem. She spent the mornings splitting wood. The maul felt good in her hands, the rhythm of swing and split, meditative and purposeful. Her body at 58 still held strength. Lean muscle over bone, no softness anywhere, her hands calloused and capable. She could work for hours without tiring, had learned to pace herself, to read her body's signals and honor them. By noon, she'd stacked 2 cords against the cabin's south wall, adding to the 5 already there. Never hurt to have too much wood. She ate lunch standing at the counter, leftover venison stew, bread she'd baked 3 days prior, an apple from the root cellar. Simple food, sufficient food. She'd never been one for elaborate meals, even before the mountain. Now she ate for fuel and little else. The afternoon found her checking fence lines along the property's eastern boundary. Not that she kept livestock beyond the chickens, but the fence marked where her land ended and national forest began. She walked slowly, hand-carved walking stick tapping the ground ahead of her, eyes scanning for damage or intrusion. Deer had rubbed bark from several posts. She'd need to reinforce those before winter. A section of wire sagged where a fallen branch had caught it. She made mental notes, her mind cataloguing repairs in order of priority. At the fence's furthest point, she could see down into the valley where Ridgeway sat. A cluster of buildings barely visible through the trees. Smoke rose from chimneys. Cars moved on distant roads. That world continued without her, and she without it, and the arrangement suited them both. She'd moved through that world once, worn a badge, carried a gun, believed in order and justice and the power of good people to hold the line against bad ones. That belief had cost her everything, or rather, the shattering of that belief had. She'd learned that corruption didn't always announce itself, that some monsters wore badges too, that speaking truth could mark you for death. So she'd run. Changed her name, though Sorn had been her mother's maiden name, so it felt less like a lie. Withdrew her savings in cash, drove until the roads ran out, and started over in a place where questions weren't asked if you kept to yourself and paid your way. The walk back to the cabin took her past the old cemetery, just beyond her property line. Stones dating back to the 1800s, most names worn smooth by weather and time. She'd spent hours here in her early years, reading the legible ones, imagining the lives they'd marked. Whole families wiped out by fever, children who'd lived days or weeks, women dead in childbirth, men killed by accidents or violence or simple hard living. The mountains took their due from everyone. She respected that. Respected the contract you made when you chose this life, that you'd meet it on its terms or you wouldn't meet it at all. Owen Breslin, her nearest neighbor, lived 1.5 miles down the mountain. He was 72, a retired forest ranger who'd known these mountains his entire life. He checked on her quarterly, usually with some excuse about having extra of something or needing to borrow a tool. They both understood the real reason. He wanted to make sure she hadn't died alone in her cabin, that someone knew she was all right. She appreciated Owen. He never pried, never asked questions about her past or why a woman her age lived alone without family or visitors. He simply accepted her as she was and offered the kind of neighborliness that respected boundaries. Last time he'd visited, 3 weeks back, he'd brought venison from a deer he'd gotten opening day of bow season. They'd sat on her porch, drinking coffee, talking about the coming winter. The almanac predicted heavy snow, and Owen's knees, reliable as any forecast, told him the same. They discussed preparations, shared tips about keeping pipes from freezing, compared notes on which trees needed to come down before they fell on something important. That easy conversation, requiring nothing of her but presence, was the closest she came to friendship anymore. In town, the people knew her as Willa Sorn, the woman from up the mountain who came in twice a month for supplies. She paid cash, spoke politely but minimally, and left without lingering. The cashier at the general store, a young woman named Kimber, had tried for years to draw her into conversation, but Willa kept her responses brief and kind. Yes, winter was coming. No, she didn't need help carrying things to her truck. Yes, the solar panels worked fine. No, she didn't get lonely. That last one was a lie, but a necessary one. Sheriff Hal Greer had been in office 19 of the 20 years she'd been here. He was 65 now, talking about retirement, and he'd always treated her with careful respect. He'd driven up to her property exactly once, early on, just to introduce himself and make sure she knew she could call if she needed anything. She'd thanked him and never called. She suspected Hal might know more about her than he let on. Something in the way he looked at her sometimes, like he recognized a fellow traveler. Someone else who'd seen things they wished they hadn't, but he never asked and she never told. And that unspoken understanding formed the basis of their relationship. The mountains themselves served as both sanctuary and prison. She loved them with an intensity that sometimes frightened her. The way the light fell through the leaves in autumn, the absolute silence of a snow-covered morning, the smell of pine and earth and growing things. But she also recognized that she'd built a cage here, however beautiful. She'd hidden herself so thoroughly that she'd almost forgotten who she'd been before. Almost, but not quite. Some nights, lying in her narrow bed, she thought about Caitlin, her younger sister by 6 years, wild and beautiful, and damaged in ways Willa had never fully understood. They'd been close once, before their parents died, before Caitlin fell in with the wrong people, before everything went to pieces. Willa had tried to help. God knows she'd tried. Used her position as a deputy to keep Caitlin out of trouble, to scare off the men who circled her like sharks, to provide bail money and second chances and stern lectures that never quite landed. But Caitlin had been determined to self-destruct, and eventually Willa had been forced to choose, save her sister or save herself. She'd chosen herself, made peace with that choice through years of therapy, with a counselor 2 counties over, someone she'd seen monthly for the first decade before deciding she'd gotten what she needed. The guilt never entirely disappeared, but it had faded to something manageable, like an old injury that ached in bad weather. She hadn't spoken to Caitlin in 20 years, didn't know if her sister was alive or dead, free or imprisoned, happy or suffering. Had learned to accept that not knowing was the price of her own survival. As evening approached, Willa returned to the cabin and prepared dinner. Chicken and vegetables roasted in the oven while she read by lamplight, a mystery novel borrowed from the library's donation box. She'd always been a reader, and books served as her window to the world she'd left behind. Through them, she traveled without moving, lived other lives without risk. After dinner, she washed dishes by hand at the deep sink, then stepped out onto the porch to watch the sunset. The sky blazed orange and red over the western mountains, the air sharp with the promise of frost. Weather was changing. She could feel it in her bones, in the way the chickens had been acting, in the quality of the light. A storm was coming. Big one, if the signs read true. She'd need to secure the barn, make sure the woodpile was covered, bring in extra water in case the lines froze. She stood there until the last light faded, until the first stars appeared in the deepening blue, until the cold drove her back inside. That night, she dreamed of Caitlin for the first time in months. Her sister as a teenager, laughing, running through a field of wildflowers. Willa chasing after her, calling her name, unable to catch up. The dream held no menace, only a gentle sadness, a reminder of what had been lost. She woke at her usual time, made coffee, watched the dawn. 3 days until the girl would appear. 3 days until everything would change. She spent those days in preparation, following the internal checklist that years of mountain living had ingrained. Reinforced the barn door, checked the generator, inventoried canned goods and found them sufficient. Split more wood despite already having plenty. Restless energy drove her, though she couldn't have said why. On the 3rd evening, the storm arrived. Wind first, bending the trees, sending loose leaves spiraling. Then rain, heavy and cold, drumming on the cabin roof. She ate early, built up the fire, and settled in to read. Weather like this, you just waited it out, trusted your preparations, and didn't worry about what you couldn't control. But around 10 o'clock, she heard something. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. A bang from the direction of the barn, like the door swinging in the wind. She'd secured that door herself just hours ago. Double-checked the latch. Willa set down her book and stood, listening. Another sound, muffled by wind and rain, but definitely there. could be an animal seeking shelter, could be the wind after all, physics overcoming her precautions, could be something else. She pulled on her rain slicker, grabbed the battery-powered lantern, and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit her face like cold needles, and the wind tried to steal the breath from her lungs. She kept her head down, one hand on the lantern, the other steadying herself against the gusts, and made her way across the clearing to the barn. The door stood open, swinging slightly despite the latch she'd secured. She approached cautiously, raising the lantern high, throwing light into the barn's interior, and there, huddled behind the hay bales, soaked to the bone and shaking, crouched a teenage girl with terrified eyes. For a moment, they just stared at each other. The girl looked ready to bolt, muscles tensed, hands braced against the ground. Willa kept still, reading the situation with 20 years of experience behind that badge she'd once worn, runaway probably. No shoes, inadequate clothing, that particular look of desperation that came from being on the run. "Easy," Willa said, pitching her voice to carry over the storm but keeping it calm. "You're all right. I'm not going to hurt you." The girl said nothing, just watched her with those wide, frightened eyes. "You picked a hell of a night to be out in this," Willa continued. "Storm's only going to get worse. You'll freeze if you stay out here." Still nothing. Willa considered her options. Could call the sheriff, have him come deal with it. That would be the responsible thing, the legal thing. But she'd learned long ago that responsible and legal didn't always mean right, and something in this girl's face triggered every protective instinct she'd thought she'd buried. "Look," she said, "I'm going back to my cabin. It's warm, there's food, and I've got dry clothes that might fit you. You can stay in the barn if you want, but you won't last the night out here, not dressed like that." She turned and walked away, a calculated risk. Sometimes you had to give people space to make their own choices, even bad ones. She made it halfway across the clearing before she heard footsteps behind her, quick and light, despite the mud. The girl followed her inside. Willa closed the door against the storm and turned to face her unexpected guest. Water pooled on the floor around the girl's bare feet, and she stood there shivering, arms wrapped around herself, looking like she might run at any second. "Bathroom's through there," Willa said, pointing. "Hot shower if you want it. I'll find you something dry to wear." She moved past the girl without waiting for a response, keeping her movements slow and predictable. In her bedroom, she dug through drawers until she found old thermal underwear, thick socks, a flannel shirt that would hang loose but provide warmth. She knocked on the bathroom door and left the clothes on the floor outside, then went to the kitchen to heat soup. The shower ran for a long time. Willa ladled venison and vegetable soup into 2 bowls, set them on the table with bread and butter, and waited. When the girl finally emerged, dressed in the oversized clothes with her dark hair hanging wet around her shoulders, she looked younger than Willa had first thought. 16, maybe 17 at most. Thin in a way that spoke of missed meals, not natural build. Dark circles under her eyes. "Sit," Willa said. "Eat." The girl sat but didn't reach for the food, just stared at the bowl like she couldn't quite believe it was real. "It's not poisoned," Willa said dryly, "and I didn't go to the trouble of bringing you inside just to harm you." The girl picked up the spoon with shaking hands and ate. Not fast, like someone starving, but with controlled bites, like she'd learned the hard way not to make herself sick by eating too quickly after going without. Willa recognized that particular discipline. She'd seen it before in her years behind the badge. They ate in silence. Outside, the storm raged on, wind howling around the cabin's corners. Inside, the fire crackled and the lamp cast warm light over the simple room. Willa watched the girl from the corner of her eye, noting details. Fresh scratches on her forearms, bruising around one wrist that might have been from restraints, nervous habit of checking the door every few seconds. When the girl finished eating, Willa cleared the bowls and poured 2 mugs of tea, set one in front of the girl, and kept the other for herself. "Got a name?" Willa asked. The girl hesitated, then, "Emery, Willa." She sipped her tea. "You running from someone, Emery?" The girl's eyes darted to the door again. "I should go. Where exactly do you plan to go in the middle of a storm with..." No shoes and no coat? Willa kept her voice calm, reasonable. I'm not turning you into anyone, just asking a question. Emery studied her for a long moment, some calculation happening behind those watchful eyes. Why would you help me? Don't know yet that I am, Willa said honestly. Right now, I'm just keeping you from dying of exposure. Tomorrow we can figure out the rest. I can't go back, Emery said quietly. I can't. Back where? The girl shook her head. It doesn't matter. They'll be looking for me by now anyway. They. Emery wrapped her hands around the mug, staring into the tea like it held answers. For a moment, Willa thought she wouldn't answer. Then the girl looked up, and something in her expression made Willa's chest tighten. You don't know me, Emery said. You've never met me before. But I know things about you, things nobody else knows. The temperature in the room seemed to drop despite the fire. Willa forced herself to remain still, to keep her face neutral. What kind of things? She asked carefully. Emery reached into her wet jeans, still piled on the bathroom floor, and pulled out a tattered backpack Willa hadn't noticed before. From it, she withdrew something wrapped in plastic. She unwrapped it slowly, revealing a jade pendant on a silver chain. Small, carved in the shape of a lotus flower, the stone a deep green that caught the lamplight. Willa's breath stopped. She knew that pendant. She'd bought it 23 years ago from a street vendor in Asheville, back when she still believed in symbols and fresh starts. She'd given it to Caitlin for her 18th birthday, hoping it might bring her sister luck, protection, something. Where did you get that? Willa's voice came out rougher than she intended. My mother gave it to me, Emery said. Before she died, the world tilted. Willa gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Your mother, Willa Sorn. Emery said the name clearly, watching for Willa's reaction. She was your sister, which makes you my aunt. For several long seconds, Willa couldn't speak, couldn't think. The name she hadn't heard aloud in 2 decades hung in the air between them like smoke. Caitlin's dead. She finally managed. Emery nodded, and Willa saw genuine grief in the girl's eyes. 6 months ago. How? They said it was an overdose. Emery's voice hardened. It wasn't. She'd been clean for 3 years. Someone killed her and made it look like she relapsed. Willa stood abruptly, paced to the window, stared out at the rain. Her reflection looked back at her, and she barely recognized the shock in her own face. Caitlin, dead, and she had a niece who was 16 or 17 and on the run from people who'd killed her mother. Why did she never tell me? Willa asked the window. Why didn't she reach out? I would have... She stopped because she wasn't sure what she would have done. She'd made her choice 20 years ago. Cut ties, disappeared, she was protecting you, Emery said. That's what she told me. Said you'd gotten out, made a new life, and she wouldn't drag you back into... She paused. Into the mess. Willa turned back to face her. What mess? The same mess she never escaped from. Emery looked down at the pendant in her hands. The same mess I'm running from now. Tell me, Willa said. It wasn't a request. Emery met her eyes. My father is Garrett Voss. You know that name? Willa's blood turned to ice. Oh yes, she knew that name. Knew it from her nightmares, from the testimony she'd given that had forced her to flee her entire life. Garrett Voss, who'd run a criminal organization spanning 3 states. Garrett Voss, who'd corrupted half the law enforcement in 2 counties. Garrett Voss, who'd put a price on her head 20 years ago that might still be active for all she knew. You're Garrett Voss's daughter, Willa said flatly. I didn't know until after Mom died, Emery said quickly. She never told me who my father was. But when she died, these men showed up. Said I belonged to them now. Said my father was getting out of prison and he wanted his daughter back. Voss got out 4 months ago. Early release for good behavior or some political favor, I don't know the details. But Mom knew it was coming. She made me promise, Emery's voice broke. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd find you. She said you were the only person she'd ever trusted, the only family worth having. She said, she swallowed hard. She said you owed her. For leaving, the words hit like a physical blow. Willa sat back down at the table, her legs suddenly unsteady. She gave me directions to this place, Emery continued. Took me weeks to get here. I've been walking, hitching rides when I could, hiding when I had to. They're looking for me. Voss's people. They found me twice, but I got away. I didn't know where else to go. Willa looked at this girl, her niece, sitting in her kitchen wearing her clothes, carrying her sister's pendant, asking for help in the name of a woman who was dead. The past she'd buried had just dug itself up and walked through her door in bare feet. "You can't stay here," Willa said. The words came out automatically, self-preservation taking over. "I know," Emery said quietly. "I'll leave in the morning. I needed to see you, to tell you about her, to give you this." She held out the pendant. Willa didn't take it. "Keep it. It was hers. She wanted you to have it back, then she should have brought it herself." The bitterness in her voice surprised even Willa. Emery stood, setting the pendant on the table between them. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come. Mom always said you'd help, but I can see—" She gestured vaguely. "You've got your own life. I'm sorry." She started toward the door, toward the storm still raging outside. "Stop," Willa said. Emery stopped. "You'll stay the night," Willa said. "In the morning, we'll figure out what comes next. But you don't go back out in that storm, and you don't walk into whatever's waiting for you out there without a plan. Understood?" Emery turned back, and relief washed across her face so powerfully that Willa felt something crack in her chest. "Thank you," the girl whispered. Willa just nodded, not trusting her voice. She showed Emery to the small bedroom, gave her extra blankets, and left her there. Then she sat alone by the fire for a long time, the jade pendant in her palm, and thought about all the ways the past could find you, no matter how far you ran. Willa didn't sleep. She sat in her chair by the fire, the jade pendant still clutched in her hand, and watched the flames until dawn broke grey and cold over the mountains. The storm had passed in the night, leaving everything washed clean and dripping. When pale light finally filtered through the windows, she stood, stretched her stiff back, and started coffee. Emery emerged from the bedroom looking hollow-eyed but determined. They ate breakfast in silence, eggs from the chickens, toast, more coffee. Willa watched the girl move through her morning routine, noting the careful way she made herself useful without being asked, clearing dishes, refilling the wood box by the stove. Someone had taught her to earn her keep. "We need to talk about what happens next," Willa said finally. Emery nodded, sitting back down at the table. In the morning light, she looked even younger and more fragile than she had the night before, but there was steel in her spine that reminded Willa painfully of Caitlin. "Tell me everything," Willa said. "From the beginning. Don't leave anything out," so Emery told her. About growing up in foster care after being taken from Caitlin when she was 3. About Caitlin fighting to get clean, to get her back, succeeding when Emery was 7. About the years they'd spent moving from town to town, Caitlin working whatever job she could find, always looking over her shoulder, always afraid. About the man Caitlin never named who sent money sometimes, who Emery now knew had been Voss, keeping track of his daughter, even from prison. "She did her best," Emery said softly.
"She really did."
"She was good to me. Taught me to read before I started school. Made sure I always had enough to eat even when she didn't. Kept me away from the drugs, the life she'd been in. She wanted better for me. But she never told you about me," Willa said. "She talked about you sometimes," Emery admitted. "Called you her big sister who'd gotten away, who'd been smart enough to save herself. She wasn't angry about it, not the way you'd think. She was proud of you for surviving." The words twisted in Willa's gut. All those years she'd carried the guilt of abandoning Caitlin, and her sister had been proud of her for it. "Why now?" Willa asked. "Why send you to me after 20 years? Because of him. Voss. Mom knew he was getting out. She'd kept track somehow, had connections that warned her. She knew he'd come for me, knew she couldn't protect me from him. She was planning to run with me, to disappear like you did, but—" Emery's voice caught. "She died before we could go. You said it wasn't an overdose. I know it wasn't. 2 days before she died, she was scared. More scared than I'd ever seen her. She kept checking the windows, wouldn't let me go to school. She wrote down directions to this place, made me memorize them. Told me about you, about the mountains, about how I should come here if anything happened. Then she went to work her night shift at the diner, and they found her in her car the next morning. Needle in her arm, her face. Emery closed her eyes. The coroner ruled it an overdose. Case closed. But I knew. I saw her body before they took her away. That wasn't someone who'd willingly put a needle in her arm. That was someone who'd fought. Willa's hands clenched into fists under the table. The men who came for you. Describe them. Professional. That's the word I'd use. They weren't street thugs. They wore nice suits, spoke politely, showed me legal papers saying I was a minor and Garrett Voss had established paternity and custody. One of them, the one in charge, had these cold eyes. Like I wasn't a person, just property being retrieved. How did you get away? Foster home didn't want trouble with men like that. They let me pack a bag, said they'd handle the paperwork. But I slipped out the back window while they were talking in the living room. I've been running since then. That was how long ago? 3 weeks. Emery met Willa's eyes. I'm good at running. Mom taught me how, just in case. How to avoid cameras, how to stay off the grid, how to find safe places to sleep. But I'm running out of options. And they're getting closer. Willa stood and paced to the window. Outside, the morning mist hung low in the valleys, and the world looked peaceful, innocent. But she'd learned long ago that peace was often just violence waiting to happen. I need to make a phone call, she said. She went to the drawer where she kept her emergency supplies. First aid kit, cash, the phone she'd bought 5 years ago but had never used. Kept charged for emergencies she'd hoped would never come. She'd memorized one number just in case. Sheriff Hal Greer's personal cell, given to her years ago with the instruction to call if she ever needed real help. The kind that couldn't go through official channels, but as her finger hovered over the call button, the sound of an engine cut through the morning quiet. Willa froze, listening. Vehicle coming up the mountain. Single engine, truck by the sound of it. She looked at Emery. Get in the bedroom. Don't come out unless I call for you. The girl moved quickly, silently, disappearing into the back room and closing the door. Willa slipped the phone into her pocket and went to the window. A familiar green pickup was making its way up her drive. Not a threat then, just Owen making one of his neighborly visits. She stepped out onto the porch as he pulled up, raising a hand in greeting. Owen climbed out of his truck with the careful movements of a man whose body had logged too many hard miles in rough country. He smiled when he saw her, but the smile faded as he got closer and got a good look at her face. You all right? He asked. Look like you haven't slept. Storm kept me up, Willa said. It wasn't entirely a lie. Came to check on you. Road washed out down by the turnoff. Took me 3 tries to get through. Figured you might need supplies or have damage I could help with. I'm fine. Property's fine. Storm passed us by, mostly. Owen studied her with eyes that had spent 72 years reading mountains and weather and people. You sure about that? I'm sure. He nodded slowly, but she could see he didn't quite believe her. His gaze drifted past her to the cabin, and she knew what he was seeing. 2 coffee mugs on the porch railing instead of her usual one. The extra pair of shoes, Emery's ruined sneakers, drying by the door that she'd forgotten to hide. You got company? Owen asked casually. Willa made a split-second decision. Owen was no fool, and lying to him would only make him more suspicious. My niece showed up last night. Unexpected visit. Family business. Didn't know you had family. Most people don't. Owen absorbed this, his expression neutral. She staying long? Haven't decided yet. Weather's turning, Owen said after a moment. Real cold front coming in. Snow by the weekend if the forecasts hold. You'll want to stock up if you're planning to be snowed in with a guest. I'll keep that in mind. He started back toward his truck, then paused. Willa, if there's trouble, you know you can ask for help. I know, do you? He turned back to face her. Because in all the years I've known you, you've never asked for a damn thing. And I'm starting to think that's not strength. That's fear. The observation landed hard. Willa kept her face carefully blank. I appreciate your concern, she said. But we're fine. Owen held her gaze for a long moment, then sighed. All right. But I'll be checking in more regular-like until this cold snap passes. Weather like this, people can get in trouble fast. She understood the message. He'd be watching, and he'd be available if she changed her mind about asking for help. It was both a comfort and a complication. After Owen drove away, Willa stood on the porch for a long time, thinking. Emery emerged from the bedroom, looking shaken. "He knows something's wrong," the girl said. "Yes," Willa agreed. "But Owen's a good man. He won't talk. How can you be sure?" "Because in 20 years, he's never once betrayed my privacy, even when I'm sure he's been curious as hell." Willa turned to face her. "But he's right about the weather. If we're going to be stuck up here, we need to make some decisions." "I should leave," Emery said. "Before I bring trouble down on you." "It's too late for that," Willa said quietly. "The moment you told me who your father is, the moment you connected me back to all of that, the trouble is already here. Now we just have to decide how we're going to handle it." She pulled out the phone and dialed Hal Greer's number. It was time to find out just how much help she could actually count on. Hal Greer answered on the third ring. "This is a surprise," he said, his voice warm but curious. "Everything all right up there, Willa?" "I need to ask you some questions," she said. "Off the record," a pause. "Then I'm listening. Garrett Voss, is he out of prison?" The silence that followed told her everything she needed to know before Hal even spoke. "He is," Hal said carefully. "Got out 4 months ago. Early release." "How do you know that name?" "From a long time ago." "Your old life," Hal said. It wasn't a question. "Willa, if Voss is reaching toward you somehow, that's serious. That's federal serious. His daughter is here with me. Caitlin Sorn's daughter, my sister's child. She's 16, and she's running from men Voss sent to collect her." Another long silence. Willa could almost hear Hal's mind working through the implications. "You're going to need to start from the beginning," he said. So she told him. A shortened version, but enough for him to understand the situation. When she finished, Hal let out a long breath. "Christ, Willa, you know I can't keep this unofficial, right? We're talking about a minor in danger, federal fugitives possibly operating in my jurisdiction." "I know," she cut him off. "But before you make it official, I need to know who I can trust." Voss had people on the inside before. Police, prosecutors, judges. How do I know he doesn't still? "You don't," Hal said bluntly. "But I can tell you that I'm clean, and I'll do everything in my power to keep that girl safe. If you bring her in, they'll put her in the system. Foster care, protective services, whatever. And Voss will find her. You know he will. These men aren't amateurs, Hal. They found her before when she was in the system. Then what are you proposing?" "I don't know yet," Willa admitted. I need time to think." "Time's a luxury you might not have. If Voss's people tracked her to your area, they'll keep looking. And when they find her, when they find you, this could go very bad very fast." "I know. Give me 24 hours, Hal said. "Let me make some calls, reach out to some people I trust. Federal prosecutors, maybe FBI if they'll listen. But Willa, you need to be prepared for the possibility that the best protection for this girl might be the legal system, flawed as it is." "She won't survive it," Willa said quietly. "Not against someone like Voss. Then we'll find another way. But you can't do this alone." After she hung up, Willa stood with the phone in her hand, staring at nothing. Emery had been listening from the bedroom doorway. "He wants to turn me in," the girl said. "He wants to keep you safe." "There's a difference." "Not to me, there isn't." Willa looked at her. "What do you want to happen here, Emery? What's your best-case scenario?" The girl's face crumpled for just a moment before she controlled it. "I want my mom back. I want the last 6 months to be a bad dream. I want—" She stopped, shook her head. "It doesn't matter what I want. I just don't want to end up with him. With Voss, I'd rather die." "Don't say that. It's true. You don't understand what he is, what he represents. Mom told me stories about the things he did, the people he hurt. She said he thinks of people as tools or obstacles, nothing else. And now I'm his daughter, his blood, and he thinks that means he owns me. He doesn't own you. Tell him that." Willa made a decision. "Get dressed. We have work to do." Over the next hours, she taught Emery the basics of mountain survival. How to split wood efficiently, how to read the weather, how to find north if you lost your bearings. She showed her the root cellar and explained food storage. Demonstrated how to bank a fire to last through the night. Small skills, practical knowledge, but underneath it all, Willa was assessing the girl's capabilities, her resilience, her ability to handle pressure. Emery proved quick to learn and willing to work hard. Despite her obvious exhaustion, she tackled every task with focus. They worked in companionable silence mostly, speaking only when instruction required it. By afternoon, they'd accomplished a week's worth of chores, and Emery looked more centered than she had since arriving. They took a break for lunch, eating soup and bread on the porch in the thin sunshine. The temperature had dropped significantly, and their breath steamed in the air. "Your sister loved this pendant," Emery said suddenly, touching the jade flower at her throat. Willa had insisted she keep wearing it. She never took it off. Said it reminded her of who she used to be before everything went wrong. "She was 17 when I gave it to her," Willa said. "Still had hope then. Still believed she could build a good life. What happened to that hope?" "Garrett Voss happened, and men like him, and choices that seemed small at the time, but added up to something you couldn't escape from." Willa set down her mug. "She told you about me?" "Some. She said you were the strong one. The one who always tried to fix things. She said you joined law enforcement because you actually believed in justice, and that believing in it that hard is what made you dangerous to people like Voss. Dangerous enough that I had to run away and hide for 20 years. Dangerous enough that you survived when a lot of other people didn't," Emery corrected gently. She was proud of that. "Of you." The words hurt in a way Willa hadn't expected. She'd spent 2 decades believing she'd failed her sister, abandoned her, chosen wrong. And Caitlin had been proud of her. "I should have done more," Willa said quietly. "Maybe," Emery allowed. "But maybe you did exactly what you needed to do to stay alive." Mom understood that. She said survival isn't selfish, it's necessary. She said you taught her that, even if it took her too long to learn it. They sat in silence after that, watching the shadows lengthen across the clearing. Eventually Emery spoke again. "There's something else you should know. Something I didn't tell you last night because I wasn't sure if I could trust you." Willa turned to look at her. "What?" "The birth certificate. The one that proves Voss is my father." Emery pulled it from her backpack, still wrapped in plastic. "It's not just proof of paternity. Look at the father's information section." Willa took the document and studied it. The father's name had been redacted, heavily blacked out. But underneath, barely visible, was a notation in different ink. A case number and the words, "Sealed by court order, criminal evidence." "What does that mean?" Willa asked. "It means I'm not just Voss's daughter," Emery said. "I'm evidence. My existence, my birth, was documented as part of a criminal investigation. Mum said it had something to do with money laundering, using my birth and adoption paperwork as cover for moving assets. She never fully explained it, but she said that certificate could bring down Voss's entire operation if it got into the right hands." Willa stared at the document, her mind racing. "That's why he wants you. Not just because you're his daughter, but because I'm a liability. If I testify about what I know, about what this document represents, it could reopen investigations that have been closed for years. Does he know you have this?" "I don't think so." Mum kept it hidden. "But he must suspect, because why else would he send men instead of just paying off a social worker to place me with him legally?" Willa looked at this girl, this scared, brave, too smart for her own good girl, and felt the weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders like a physical thing. Emery wasn't just a runaway niece anymore. She was a weapon that could be used against one of the most dangerous men Willa had ever known. And she'd brought that weapon straight to Willa's door. "We need to figure out our next move," Willa said. "And we need to do it fast." But even as she said it, she heard the sound of vehicles approaching. Multiple vehicles moving fast up the mountain road. They weren't ready. They weren't even close to ready. But ready or not, trouble had just found them. "Inside," Willa said sharply. "Now." They moved quickly, Willa grabbing the birth certificate and shoving it into her jacket pocket. She pulled Emery through the door, locked it behind them, and went straight to the gun safe hidden in her bedroom closet. Her hands moved on autopilot. Combination entered, door opened, weapons revealed. A shotgun, a rifle, and the Glock 19 she'd carried as a deputy 20 years ago. She grabbed a handgun, checked the magazine. Unchambered around. Get in the bathroom, she told Emery. Stay there until I tell you otherwise. What if they... Stay in the bathroom, Willa repeated firmly. I'll handle this. She watched Emery disappear into the bathroom, then took up position by the front window where she could see without being easily seen. 2 vehicles pulled into her clearing, a black SUV and a sedan, both expensive and well-maintained. Not local, not friendly. 3 men emerged, 2 from the SUV, 1 from the sedan. They wore civilian clothes, but moved with professional coordination, scanning the area before approaching the cabin. The one from the sedan appeared to be in charge. Mid-40s, fit, with the kind of careful grooming that spoke of money and attention to detail. Cold eyes, just like Emery had described. Willa made a decision. She set the gun on the counter, where she could reach it, but where it wouldn't be immediately visible, then stepped out onto the porch. Better to meet them outside than let them think she had something to hide. Can I help you, gentlemen? She called out, her voice carrying across the clearing. The leader smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Good afternoon, ma'am. We're looking for someone. A teenage girl, about 16 years old, dark hair. She might be traveling alone. Have you seen anyone matching that description? I haven't seen anyone, Willa said evenly. Don't get many visitors up here. Mind if we ask what brings you to check way up here? She kept her tone conversational but firm. This is private property. We're working with social services, the man said smoothly, pulling out what looked like official identification. The girl is a runaway from state custody. We've been authorized to return her to appropriate care. Social services usually sends a caseworker, not 3 men in expensive vehicles, Willa observed. Special circumstances. The girl's father has significant resources and is very concerned about her welfare. If she's not here, then you've wasted a trip. The man studied her for a long moment. You live here alone? I do. Funny, your neighbor mentioned you had a visitor. A niece, he said. Damn Owen and his honest tongue. Family business. Nothing to do with your runaway. I'd like to verify that if you don't mind. Just a quick look around to confirm you're not harboring a fugitive minor. I do mind, Willa said flatly. You have no warrant, no legal authority here, and you're on my land. I've answered your questions. Now I'm asking you to leave. The man's pleasant expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. The other 2 men moved slightly apart, creating angles of approach. Professional tactical movement, ma'am. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. We're going to look around. You can cooperate, or what? Willa cut him off. You'll force your way into my home? That's called breaking and entering. And up here, I'm well within my rights to defend my property. She let the implication hang in the air. The men exchanged glances. We don't want any trouble, the leader said. Then leave. I need to verify. I've told you what you need to know. The girl you're looking for isn't here. Now get off my property before I call the sheriff. Sheriff Greer. The man smiled again. We've already spoken with the sheriff's office. They're aware of our search and have been very cooperative. That statement sent ice through Willa's veins. Either they were lying or Hal's department had been compromised. Either way, she couldn't count on official help arriving in time. Last chance, she said quietly. Leave now, or this situation escalates in ways you won't like. The leader nodded to one of his men, who started toward the cabin. Willa moved fast, stepping back inside and grabbing the Glock in one smooth motion. She reappeared in the doorway with the weapon raised and pointed directly at the approaching man. Stop right there. Everyone froze. Jesus Christ, lady, one of the men said. You're really going to pull a gun on us? Already pulled it, Willa said calmly. Next question is whether I'm going to use it. And I'm telling you right now, I will defend my property and my family. You have no legal standing here. You have no warrant. You're trespassing. So I'm giving you one more chance to leave peacefully. The leader held up his hands in a placating gesture. All right, we're going. No need for violence. Smart choice. They backed toward their vehicles, but the leader paused before getting in. You should know that Mr. Voss is very determined to find his daughter. Very determined. And he has significant resources at his disposal. If you're sheltering her, you're making yourself an enemy of a very dangerous man. I've made enemies of dangerous men before, Willa said. I'm still here. For now, the man said quietly. Then he got in his vehicle, and both cars pulled away down the mountain road. Willa stood on the porch until the sound of their engines faded completely. Only then did she lower the gun, her hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. She went back inside and called out to Emery. The girl emerged from the bathroom pale but composed. They're gone? For now. But they'll be back. And next time, they'll bring more people or come at night or find some other way to get to you. I'm sorry, Emery said. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have come here. I've put you in danger. Stop, Willa said. You did exactly what your mother told you to do. She sent you to me because she trusted me to protect you. And that's what I'm going to do. How? You heard him. Boss has resources, people. So do I, Willa said. Or I used to, anyway. It's time to find out if any of those connections still exist. She pulled out the phone again and scrolled through the contacts she'd programmed years ago. Names from her old life that she'd hoped she'd never need to use. Most would probably be outdated. Some of those people might be dead, but maybe, just maybe, one or two would still be there. Her finger hovered over a name, Leonard Park, former ATF agent. The one person from her old life who'd believed her when she'd talked about corruption, who'd tried to help before it became too dangerous. She'd had no contact with him in 2 decades, but his number had been important enough to save. She pressed dial. The phone rang 4 times before a man's voice, cautious and unfamiliar with this number, answered. Who is this? My name is Willa Sorn, she said. But 20 years ago you knew me as Deputy Marion Voss. I need help, Leonard. And I'm calling in every favor you ever owed me. The silence on the other end stretched so long she thought he might hang up. Then, Jesus Christ, Marion, we all thought you were dead. I was. Now I need to come back to life long enough to finish something I should have finished 20 years ago. What are you talking about? Garrett Voss, his daughter, and evidence that could finally bring down his entire operation. Another long pause. Then Leonard Park, retired ATF agent and the only person from her old life she'd ever fully trusted, said the words she needed to hear, tell me everything, and then tell me how I can help. Leonard Park listened without interrupting as Willa laid out the situation. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, processing. Marion, sorry, Willa, you understand what you're asking here? Voss has spent 20 years building legitimate business fronts. He's got lawyers, political connections, money laundering operations so sophisticated that even the FBI can't untangle them. Going after him now, with just a birth certificate and a scared kid's testimony, is more than we had 20 years ago, Willa finished. Leonard, I know it's a long shot, but I can't let him have this girl. She's my blood, and she's the only thing left of my sister. I won't abandon her the way I abandoned Caitlin. You didn't abandon your sister. You survived. I'm not sure there's a difference anymore. Leonard sighed. All right, let me make some calls. There's a federal prosecutor, Marcus Haynes, who's been trying to build a case against Voss for years. He's clean. I'd stake my life on it. If anyone will help, it's him. But Willa, you need to understand that going this route means exposure. Your new identity, your quiet life, all of that disappears the moment you step back into this. I understand. And there's no guarantee we can protect the girl. Voss has reach that extends into protective services, into law enforcement. Until we can build an actual case with actual charges, she's vulnerable. Then we move fast, Willa said. How long to reach Haynes? Give me 12 hours. I'll drive up to where he is, explain the situation in person. Phone calls can be intercepted, and I don't trust electronic communication with something this sensitive. Can you hold out for 12 hours? We'll have to. After hanging up, Willa found Emery sitting at the kitchen table, the birth certificate spread out in front of her. The girl traced the redacted sections with one finger, her expression distant. My mom tried to protect me from all of this, Emery said quietly. She never told me who my father was, never let me see documents like this. I think she hoped that if I didn't know, I'd be safe. Like ignorance could be a shield. Sometimes ignorance is a shield, Willa said, sitting across from her. But not with men like Voss. He would have found you eventually, whether you knew about him or not. Do you think she's watching? Emery looked up. Mom, do you think she knows I found you? Willa considered the question seriously. She'd never been particularly religious, but 2 decades in the mountains had taught her that there were forces in the world beyond simple understanding. I think if she's anywhere, she's proud of you for being smart enough and strong enough to survive this long. And I think she'd want you to keep surviving, whatever it takes. What if survival means testifying against my own father? Then that's what it means. Blood doesn't obligate you to protect monsters, Emery. Your loyalty is to yourself and to the truth. They spent the afternoon preparing for what might come. Willa showed Emery the escape routes from the cabin, the paths through the woods that would take her to Owen's place or down to the main road. She made sure the girl knew how to use the CB radio in case of emergency, how to signal for help. Basic survival training that Willa hoped wouldn't be necessary, but knew very well might be. As evening approached, they heard another vehicle coming up the mountain. This time it was Hal Greer's cruiser, lights off but moving with purpose. Willa watched from the window as the sheriff parked and got out, his expression grim. She met him on the porch. Those men who came earlier said they'd talked to your office. They lied, Hal said flatly. Nobody from my department spoke with them. But I've got bigger problems now. Federal marshals showed up at my office an hour ago with documentation showing that Willa Sorn is a material witness in an ongoing federal investigation. They have a court order for protective custody. Can I see it? Hal handed over the paperwork. Willa scanned it quickly, her trained eye picking up details. The order was legitimate, properly filed, all the signatures where they should be. But something felt wrong. When was this filed? She asked. This morning, according to the dates. This morning. The same day those men showed up at my door. Willa looked up at Hal. That's awfully fast, don't you think? Like they already knew where she was and just needed the legal cover to take her. It's possible they've been tracking her and just now got the paperwork together. Or it's possible Voss has someone inside the federal system who can generate convincing forgeries. She handed the papers back. Did you verify these marshals' identities? Of course. Called the Marshal Service's regional office. They confirmed the names and badge numbers, but did you confirm this specific operation? This specific court order? Hal's expression shifted as he realized what she was suggesting. You think this is a fake? I think Voss has had 20 years and significant resources to build connections throughout law enforcement. I think a convincing fake court order is well within his capabilities. And I think handing Emery over to anyone right now is signing her death warrant. If these are real marshals and you're obstructing, then I'll face the consequences. But Hal, I need you to do something for me. I need you to verify this order through back channels, not official calls that can be monitored. Personal connections, people you trust absolutely. Can you do that? The sheriff was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. I can try. But Willa, if these marshals come back with backup, I won't be able to stop them from executing that order. You understand that? I understand. How much time do you need? 12 hours. Maybe less. I'll do what I can. Hal started back to his cruiser, then paused. The girl, Emery, she really your niece? She is. Your sister's daughter? Yes. The sister you never mentioned in 20 years. The sister I was trying to keep alive by staying away from her. Willa said quietly. For all the good it did, Hal nodded slowly. Family's complicated, but for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Just be careful. These people you're dealing with, they don't play by rules. Neither do I, Willa said. Not anymore. After Hal left, Willa went back inside to find Emery had been listening from the kitchen doorway. We're running out of time, the girl said. Yes. What happens when they come back? The real ones or the fake ones doesn't matter. What happens when we can't hold them off anymore? Willa looked at her niece, this brave, frightened girl who'd walked barefoot through the rain to find an aunt she'd never met, carrying a dead woman's pendant and a document that might destroy a criminal empire. She thought about Caitlin, about all the ways she'd failed her sister, about the chance she had now to do better, to save something that mattered. Then we run, Willa said simply. We take that birth certificate, and we run until we find someone who can help us. We don't stop, we don't give up, and we don't let them take you. Whatever happens, Emery, I promise you, I won't abandon you the way I abandoned your mother. What if they kill us? Then we die fighting, Willa said. But we don't die giving up. Emery nodded, and Willa saw acceptance in her eyes. Not resignation, but understanding. They both knew what they were facing. They both knew the odds. But sometimes knowing the odds wasn't enough to stop you from fighting anyway. That night, they took turns sleeping, one always awake and watching. The darkness pressed against the windows, and every sound made them tense. But the hours passed without incident, and when dawn finally broke, they were still there, still free, still alive. For now, that would have to be enough. The call from Leonard Park came at 6 in the morning. Willa had been awake for hours, watching the sunrise paint the mountain ridges gold and pink, drinking coffee that had gone cold in her mug. She grabbed the phone on the first ring. "I'm with Haynes," Leonard said without preamble. "We're 3 hours out from your location." "But Willa, we've got a situation." "What kind of situation?" "The kind where I need you to sit down before I tell you." Willa remained standing. "Just say it, Leonard. We ran a full background on the birth certificate information. The case number, the sealed evidence, notation, everything. That certificate isn't just connected to Voss's criminal activities. It's part of a custody agreement filed 20 years ago. A temporary guardianship that was never officially dissolved. I don't understand. Willa, you had custody of Emery. Legal custody. When she was an infant, the world tilted. Willa gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. That's impossible. The paperwork is in the federal database, sealed as part of the investigation into Voss. Your sister Caitlin gave birth to Emery while Voss was awaiting trial. She signed temporary custody to you because she was afraid. Afraid of Voss, afraid of his associates, afraid she couldn't protect her baby. The agreement was filed through the court system as part of a protective order. You had Emery for 3 months. No, Willa said. But even as she denied it, fragments of memory were surfacing, a weight in her arms, crying in the night. The overwhelming terror of being responsible for something so small and fragile, while everything around her was falling apart. No, I would remember. The court psychologist's report says you were dealing with severe trauma at the time. Death threats, witness intimidation, the stress of testifying against Voss. You were barely holding it together. And then one night, Caitlin showed up and took Emery, just disappeared with her. You filed a missing persons report, but it went nowhere. A month later, you disappeared too. Willa's legs finally gave out. She sat heavily at the kitchen table, the phone pressed to her ear. I forgot. God help me. I completely forgot I ever had her. Traumatic memory suppression. It happens. The mind protects itself. I had her and I lost her, and then I forgot about her entirely. The words tasted like ash. What kind of person does that? A person who was surviving the only way they could, Leonard said firmly. But here's the thing. That custody agreement was never formally dissolved. Legally speaking, you still have guardianship rights, which means those marshals who showed up with the protective custody order. They need your consent to take her. And if you refuse, they'll need to prove you're an unfit guardian before they can override your custody. That's a legal technicality. It won't stop Voss. No, but it buys us time. Haynes thinks we can use this. If you reassert your custody rights, file for permanent guardianship, and simultaneously turn over the birth certificate as evidence in a federal case, we might be able to build a protection order that actually holds. The key is establishing Emery as a witness in an active investigation before Voss can get to her. Willa looked up to find Emery standing in the bedroom doorway, her face pale and shocked. She'd heard everything. I'll call you back, Willa said, and hung up. The silence in the cabin felt suffocating. Emery walked slowly to the table and sat down across from Willa, her movements mechanical. You had me, the girl said. You were my guardian. I didn't remember. I swear to God I didn't. Why didn't you tell me? When I showed up here, when I told you I was Caitlin's daughter, why didn't you remember? Because my mind buried it, Willa said, her voice breaking. Because I was falling apart back then, and remembering would have meant facing how badly I'd failed. I lost you. Your mother took you and ran, and I couldn't find you, and eventually I had to run too. I buried all of it so deep that it might as well have never happened. You forgot about me. Emery's voice was small, wounded. Your own niece, the baby you were supposed to protect. Yes, there was no defense, no excuse good enough. I did, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that. But right now, we have a decision to make. That custody agreement means I can legally assert guardianship over you. It means we have a weapon to use against Voss and his people. But only if you're willing to let me claim that guardianship after you forgot I existed. After I failed you once before, yes. But Emery, I'm not that person anymore. The woman who forgot you was drowning. The woman I am now, the woman I've spent 20 years becoming, she won't let you down. I swear it. Emery looked down at her hands, at the jade pendant hanging around her neck. Mom knew, didn't she? That's why she sent me to you. Not just because you were family, but because legally you were already my guardian. Probably. Caitlin was smart. She would have researched it, would have known that agreement was still valid. She wanted you to take me back. To finish what you started 20 years ago. I think she wanted you to be safe. And she believed I could keep you safe, even after everything that happened. Can you keep me safe? Willa met her niece's eyes. I don't know. But I will die trying. That's the only promise I can make. If you let me reassert guardianship, if you trust me with this, I will do everything in my power to protect you and to make sure Voss never gets his hands on you. But the choice is yours. I won't force you. Emery was quiet for a long time. Outside, a bird called, sharp and clear in the morning air. The sun climbed higher, burning off the mist that clung to the valleys. She loved you, Emery said finally. Mom, even after everything, even after you left, she loved you. She said you were the only person who'd ever really tried to save her, even when she didn't want to be saved. She said you were strong enough to do what needed to be done. I didn't feel strong. I felt like a coward. Maybe being strong and being scared aren't opposites, Emery said. Maybe they're the same thing, and the only difference is what you do while you're scared. The wisdom in those words, wisdom beyond the girl's years, reminded Willa so much of Caitlin that her chest ached. Her sister had survived long enough to raise a daughter worth saving, had loved hard enough to send that daughter to the one person who might protect her, even knowing the history between them. I'll do it, Emery said. I'll let you be my guardian. We'll use the custody agreement against him. You're sure? No, but Mom was sure about you, and right now that's going to have to be enough. Willa nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She picked up the phone and called Leonard back. We're in, she said. Draw up whatever paperwork you need. I'm reasserting guardianship, and we're using that birth certificate as evidence. Tell Haynes we'll testify, both of us, against Voss and anyone connected to him. Understood. We'll be there in 2 hours. But Willa, you need to be prepared. Once we file this paperwork, once we officially involve the federal courts, everything becomes public. Your location, your identity, all of it. Voss will know exactly where you are. I understand. And he won't wait for legal proceedings. He'll come for the girl before we can establish protection. Then we'll be ready for him, against Voss's resources. Willa, you're one woman with a hunting rifle on a mountain. You can't. I'm not planning to shoot it out with him, Leonard. I'm planning to outthink him. I've had 20 years to learn these mountains, to prepare for the possibility that my past might find me. I've got advantages he doesn't know about, and I've got something worth fighting for now. She looked at Emery, who was watching her with a mixture of fear and trust. I've got my daughter back, Willa said quietly. And this time, I'm not losing her. The words hung in the air between them, daughter, not niece. A claim that went beyond biology or legal documents. A claim of the heart. Emery's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Okay, she whispered. Okay, 2 hours. They had 2 hours before Leonard and Haynes arrived, with the legal protection they desperately needed. 2 hours before the paperwork went public and Voss knew exactly where to find them. 2 hours to prepare for the fight of their lives. Willa stood and offered her hand to Emery. The girl took it, and together they began. They moved with purpose through the cabin, Willa directing and Emery executing, without question. First priority, defensive preparations. Willa had never been a doomsday prepper, but 20 years of living alone in the mountains had taught her the value of readiness. From the barn, she retrieved the items she'd assembled over the years and hoped never to use. Motion sensors that could be placed along the access road, a CB radio with batteries fully charged, flares, a medical kit more extensive than most rural clinics kept, and buried in a waterproof container beneath the workbench. A go bag she'd packed 15 years ago and updated annually, cash, fake ID, burner phones. Everything needed for a fast disappearance. She showed Emery how to set the motion sensors, spacing them at 100-yard intervals along the single road that led to the cabin. Each sensor would trigger an alert on the CB unit, giving them advance warning of approaching vehicles. How much warning will this give us? Emery asked. 5 minutes, maybe 10 if they're driving cautious. Enough to decide whether we're staying to fight or running to hide. Which are we doing? Depends on who's coming, Willa said. If it's Leonard and Haynes, we stand our ground. If it's Voss's people before the legal protection is in place, we run. We've got escape routes mapped. 3 different paths through the woods that lead to safe points. Owen's place is one. There's an old ranger station 2 miles east that nobody uses anymore. And there's a cave system about a mile north that only locals know about. They returned to the cabin, and Willa pulled out her topographical maps, spreading them across the kitchen table. The paper was worn from years of study, marked with pencil notations in her careful handwriting. These are the routes, she said, tracing them with her finger. This one is fastest but most exposed. This one is more protected but rougher terrain. This one is the longest but has the best cover and multiple exit points if we're being pursued. Emery studied the maps with the same intensity she'd brought to every task. You really have been planning for this. For someone finding you, not specifically this. But I've always known that running away doesn't mean being safe forever. It just means buying time. And time only matters if you use it to prepare for what comes next. Is that why you never left? 20 years in the same place seems like the opposite of staying hidden. Sometimes the best hiding place is right in plain sight, Willa said. I became part of the community, predictable and boring. The woman on the mountain who keeps to herself and causes no trouble. That's invisible in its own way. People stop seeing you when you're too ordinary to notice. She folded the maps and handed them to Emery. Put these in the go bag. If we have to run, you'll need them, while Emery packed. Willa went through the cabin one more time, making mental notes of what could be left and what couldn't. The photo albums from her childhood, those went in the bag. Her mother's wedding ring in the bag. The hand-carved walking stick, too obvious, too traceable, left behind. Everything was evaluated through the lens of survival versus sentimentality, and survival won every time. The CB radio crackled to life. Motion sensor 1 had been triggered. They both froze. Could be Leonard, Emery said. Too soon. They said 2 hours. It's only been 45 minutes. Another crackle. Sensor 2. Vehicles moving fast, Willa said. Whoever it is, they know where they're going. She moved to the window, staying back from the glass, and scanned the road. A single vehicle appeared through the trees. Not an SUV or sedan, but a pickup truck she recognized. Owen's green pickup. Relief and concern flooded through her in equal measure. She opened the door as Owen pulled up, and one look at his face told her something was wrong. You need to leave, he said before he was even fully out of the truck. Now, there's a whole convoy coming up the mountain. 5 vehicles, maybe 6. Professional operation. They're going door to door down in Ridgeway, asking about you and showing pictures of the girl. How long do we have? 20 minutes if you're lucky. I came up the back way to warn you, but they're taking the main road, and they're moving with purpose. Willa made the decision in seconds. We're leaving. Emery grabbed the go bag. Owen, can you... I'll stay here, Owen said. Slow them down if I can. Tell them I came to check on you and you were already gone. Won't stop them long, but it might buy you a few extra minutes. They could hurt you. I'm 72 years old, Willa. What are they going to do, shoot an elderly man for visiting his neighbor? That's not the kind of attention they want. He looked at her seriously. But you need to understand, these people are thorough. They will search every inch of this property. If you've left anything behind that leads them to where you're going, they'll find it, Willa thought fast. The maps were packed. The CB radio was portable, but the motion sensors were still out there, and they'd lead directly to her escape routes if Voss's people were smart enough to read them properly. The sensors, she said to Owen. Do you know where I placed them? I can guess. You always were predictable in your tactics. Can you retrieve them after we're gone? Before they get here, I'll do my best. She clasped his shoulder. Thank you for everything. For 20 years of looking out for me without asking why. I had my guesses, Owen said gently. Woman your age, living alone, looking over her shoulder every time a strange car came through town. Didn't take a genius to figure you were running from something. Just hoped you'd find whatever piece you were looking for up here. I did, Willa said. And now I'm leaving it all behind to protect her. She gestured to Emery, who stood ready with the go bag over her shoulder. That's what family does, Owen said. Now go. I'll handle things here. They took the northern route, the one with the best cover and multiple exit points. The terrain was rough, exactly as Willa had described. Steep slopes, loose rock, thick undergrowth that grabbed at their clothes and scratched exposed skin. But Willa moved through it with confidence born of years of hiking these exact paths, and Emery followed her lead without complaint. Behind them, faint in the distance, they heard engines. The convoy had arrived. Don't look back, Willa said. Just keep moving. They pushed through for 30 minutes before Willa finally called a halt in a small clearing protected on 3 sides by rock faces. She pulled out the CB radio and switched it to the frequency she and Leonard had agreed on. Park, this is Sorn. Do you copy? Static, then Leonard's voice. Copy, what's your status? We've bugged out. Voss's people hit the cabin before you arrived. We're mobile, heading to backup location Alpha. Understood. We're 15 minutes from your cabin now. I'll make contact with local law enforcement. See if we can intercept them before they pick up your trail. Negative. These people are too well connected. Your arrival will just alert them that we have federal support. Better you stay clear until we can establish secure custody of the evidence. Willa, you can't run forever with a teenage girl through mountain terrain. You need backup. I know these mountains better than anyone. We'll make it to the ranger station. You meet us there in 2 hours with the custody paperwork and Judge Haynes. We'll hand over the birth certificate, establish legal guardianship, and get Emery into actual protective custody. But it has to be clean, Leonard. No leaks, no compromises. Can you guarantee that? A pause. I can guarantee, Haynes. The rest is going to be a controlled chaos. Then controlled chaos it is. 2 hours. Don't be late. She switched off the radio to conserve batteries. Emery sat on a fallen log, catching her breath, her face flushed from exertion. Are we going to make it? The girl asked. We're going to make it, Willa said with more confidence than she felt. We just need to keep moving and stay ahead of them for 2 more hours. And then what? We're in protective custody. We testify against Voss, and we live happily ever after in witness protection somewhere. Honestly, I don't know what happens then. I just know that we keep you out of Voss's hands, and we get that birth certificate to someone who can actually use it to bring him down. The rest we'll figure out as we go. That's a terrible plan. It's the only plan we've got, Emery laughed. A slightly hysterical sound that turned into something closer to a sob. Mom would hate this. She spent her whole life trying to keep me away from this world, and here I am, running through the woods with federal evidence in my backpack, being hunted by my own father's thugs. Your mother would be proud of you, Willa said firmly. You're strong, you're smart, and you're surviving. That's all she ever wanted for you. What do you want for me? The question caught Willa off guard. She looked at this girl, this daughter she'd forgotten and then rediscovered, this fierce young woman who'd walked through fire to find family, and felt something shift in her chest. A door opening that she'd thought was sealed forever. I want you to be safe, she said finally. I want you to go to school and make friends and worry about normal things like homework and first crushes. I want you to have the childhood your mother couldn't give you. I want you to be free. And you? Emery asked. What do you want for yourself? Willa considered the question as she shouldered the go-bag and gestured for Emery to follow her deeper into the mountains. What did she want? She'd spent 20 years wanting only to be left alone, to be safe, to be invisible. But now, with every step away from her cabin and toward an uncertain future, she realized those wants had changed. I want to be your guardian, she said, for real this time. Not because a piece of paper says I should be, but because it's what I choose. I want to do right by you and by Caitlin's memory. That's what I want. Emery reached out and took her hand. They walked like that for a while, hand in hand through the wilderness, running towards safety or danger or something in between. 2 hours until they reached the ranger station. 2 hours until Leonard and Haynes arrived with the legal protection they needed. 2 hours to outrun the past and claim whatever future they could build together. The mountains rose around them, ancient and implacable, bearing witness to their flight as they'd borne witness to countless other human dramas over countless years. And somewhere behind them, getting closer by the minute, came the men who wanted to drag them back into darkness. But Willa kept walking, kept moving forward, kept choosing with every step to fight rather than surrender. It was all she'd ever known how to do. They'd been moving for 90 minutes when they heard the first sounds of pursuit. Distant voices, the crackle of radios, the unmistakable noise of multiple people moving through underbrush without concern for stealth. Voss's people had picked up their trail. How? Emery whispered. How did they find us so fast? Willa's mind raced through possibilities. The motion sensors Owen might not have cleared in time, tracks they'd left despite her care, or something simpler and more worrying, someone in law enforcement feeding information to Voss's people, telling them exactly which routes a person fleeing the cabin might take. Doesn't matter, she said. We just need to move faster. But faster was a relative term in terrain this rough. Emery was doing well for a city girl with no mountain experience, but she was tiring, her breathing labored, her movements less sure. Willa, despite her fitness, was 58, and the adrenaline that had carried her this far was beginning to fade, leaving exhaustion in its wake. The voices behind them grew closer. Willa made a decision. The cave system, she said. We can't outrun them to the ranger station, but we can hide long enough for Leonard to reach our position. She changed direction, angling northeast toward the limestone formations that honeycombed this part of the mountain. She'd explored these caves years ago, mapped them mentally, knew which ones went deep enough to hide in and which were dead ends that would trap you. The entrance she sought was masked by overgrowth, barely visible unless you knew where to look. She pulled aside the hanging vines and revealed a gap in the rock face, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Inside, she told Emery. Quick! The girl slipped through without hesitation. Willa followed, pulling the vines back into place behind them. The darkness inside was absolute, the air cool and damp. She pulled a small flashlight from the go-bag and clicked it on, keeping the beam pointed down. They were in a narrow passage that opened into a larger chamber about 30 feet in. Willa led the way, moving carefully on the uneven floor. The chamber had 2 other passages leading deeper into the mountain, and she chose the eastern one, the one that led to a small cavern with a natural shelf that would hide them from casual inspection. They reached the cavern, and Willa killed the flashlight. In the darkness, they could hear everything, their own breathing, the drip of water somewhere deeper in the cave system, and eventually, voices from outside. They went this way. You sure? I don't see any tracks. The dogs got something. Keep moving, dog. They had tracking dogs. Willa's stomach sank. All her careful work covering their trail meant nothing against an animal's nose. Beside her in the darkness, Emery's breathing had gone quick and shallow, panic starting to set in. Willa reached out, found the girl's hand, squeezed it firmly. Listen to me, she whispered, barely a breath of sound. We're going deeper. There's water below us, an underground stream. Water will break the scent trail. But we have to move now, and we have to move silent. Can you do that? She felt Emery nod. Willa turned the flashlight back on, keeping it dimmed, and led them deeper into the cave system. The eastern passage descended steeply, and soon they could hear the rush of water. The stream ran fast and cold, fed by mountain snowmelt, and it would be numbingly frigid. But it would also mask their scent and give them a path that dogs couldn't follow. They reached the stream bank. Willa pulled out the waterproof bags from the go bag and sealed their most critical items inside. The birth certificate, the cash, the phones. Then she stepped into the water and gasped at the shock of it. "It's going to be cold," she warned Emery, "but we follow it downstream for maybe half a mile. Then we can get out and circle back toward the ranger station." Emery stepped in beside her, and Willa heard her sharp intake of breath. But the girl didn't complain, just started moving through the knee-deep water, using her hands on the cave walls for balance. Behind them, from the upper passages, came the sound of dogs barking, excited and close. Flashlight beams danced across the cave walls. "There's someone in here. I've got tracks leading to the water. Follow the stream." They can't have gotten far, but they were wrong. Willa knew these caves, knew where the stream bent and forked, knew which passages led to exits and which led to dead ends. She moved quickly through the icy water, Emery keeping pace, both of them fighting against the current and the cold and their own exhaustion. The sounds of pursuit echoed strangely in the confined space, making it impossible to judge distances accurately. But Willa kept moving, kept following the mental map she'd built over years of exploration, until finally she saw what she'd been looking for, a break in the cave wall where daylight filtered through. They emerged into afternoon sun, dripping and shaking with cold, but free. The ranger station was visible through the trees, maybe a quarter-mile away, and pulling up to it, exactly on time, was Leonard Park's vehicle. They'd made it. Against odds that should have been insurmountable, they'd made it. Willa allowed herself exactly 3 seconds of relief. Then she grabbed Emery's hand and ran. Leonard Park saw them coming and had his weapon drawn before he recognized them. Behind him, a silver-haired man in his 60s emerged from the station. Judge Marcus Haynes, Willa assumed. Both men looked shocked at their condition, soaked and shivering and clearly pursued. "They're right behind us," Willa gasped as they reached the station. "Dogs, armed men, maybe 5 minutes back." "Inside," Leonard said, already pulling out his phone. "Haynes, get them warm. I'm calling for backup." "Backup from who?" Willa demanded. "We don't know who's compromised. FBI field office, direct line to people I trust. They've been waiting on standby for my call." Leonard was already dialing. "But first, I need that birth certificate." Willa pulled the waterproof bag from her pack, hands shaking from cold and adrenaline. She passed it to Haynes, who opened it carefully and examined the document inside. His expression shifted from skeptical to grimly satisfied. "This is it," he said. "This is what we need. The case number connects to financial records we've been trying to access for years. If we can prove this birth was used as part of a laundering scheme, can you protect her?" Willa interrupted. "That's all that matters right now. Can you keep Emery safe from Voss?" "Oh, we can try," Haynes said honestly. "With this evidence and her testimony, we can file charges that will put him away for life. But until we have him in custody, she's at risk. We need to get her into federal protection immediately." Leonard's phone call ended. "Choppers inbound, 15 minutes. FBI tactical team with it. But we need to hold this position until they arrive." From the woods, they heard shouting. The pursuit was closing in. "Can we defend this position?" Willa asked. Leonard assessed the ranger station quickly. Old wood construction, windows that couldn't stop bullets, one entrance and one back door. "It's not ideal, but it's what we've got. Haynes, take the women to the back room." "Willa, you armed?" She pulled the Glock from her waistband. Leonard nodded approval. "I need you watching the back approach. I'll cover the front. We're not trying to win a firefight. Just delay until the cavalry arrives. Nobody shoots unless absolutely necessary. These might be Voss's people, but they're still humans. And I'd rather not start a bloodbath if we can avoid it." Willa positioned herself at the back window while Emery and Haynes took shelter in the small office that served as the station's storage room. Through the glass, she could see movement in the trees. They were being surrounded. The first man to emerge was the leader from the cabin, the one with cold eyes. He had 3 others with him, all armed but keeping their weapons lowered, professional enough to know that brandishing guns at a federal building would bring consequences they didn't want. "We just want the girl," he called out. "Nobody needs to get hurt here." "The girl is in federal custody," Leonard called back from the front. "You're interfering with an active investigation." "I'm Special Agent Leonard Park, ATF, and I'm ordering you to leave this property immediately. Your jurisdiction ended 20 years ago when you retired, Park. You're just a civilian now. Hand over the girl before this gets ugly." "FBI tactical team is inbound," Leonard said calmly. "They'll be here in 12 minutes. You really want to be here when they arrive? Because I can guarantee they'll have questions about why armed men are threatening federal witnesses." A moment of uncertainty. Willa saw the leader pull out a phone, make a quick call. He listened, his expression darkening, then hung up. "Our employer is very insistent," he said. "The girl belongs to him. She's his daughter." "Daughter isn't property," Willa called out from her window. "And I'm her legal guardian. I have custody paperwork that says she stays with me. That paperwork is 20 years old. It's never been dissolved. Judge Haynes can verify it." She glanced at the judge, who nodded confirmation. "So you have no legal standing here? You're just kidnappers trying to take a minor against the will of her legal guardian." The standoff stretched. Willa could see more men in the woods now, maybe 8 total. They had superior numbers and firepower. If they decided to storm the station, Leonard and Willa couldn't stop them all. But they also knew that FBI was coming. That changed the math significantly. These were professional criminals who understood risk versus reward. Taking a federal building by force, harming federal agents and witnesses, that was the kind of heat that even Voss's connections couldn't cool down. The leader made another call, listened, then finally gestured to his men to withdraw. "This isn't over," he called out. "Mr. Voss will pursue every legal avenue to establish custody. You've bought yourselves time, nothing more." "Time is all we need," Leonard said. They withdrew into the woods, and minutes later, Willa heard vehicles departing. The threat wasn't gone, just delayed. But delayed was enough. The sound of helicopter rotors cut through the mountain air, growing louder. The FBI had arrived exactly on schedule. Willa lowered her weapon and finally allowed herself to breathe. They'd made it. Against everything, they'd actually made it. Emery emerged from the back room and fell into Willa's arms, both of them shaking with relief and exhaustion, and the delayed shock of survival. "It's over," Emery whispered. "Not quite," Willa said. "But we're safe. For now, we're safe. And for now, that was enough." The weeks that followed were a blur of lawyers, statements, and federal proceedings. Willa and Emery spent 3 days in protective custody, while Judge Haynes built his case with the birth certificate as the cornerstone. The document proved even more valuable than they'd hoped, connecting, not just to money laundering, but to a network of shell companies and fraudulent adoptions that Voss had used to move assets. Internationally, within 2 weeks, Garrett Voss was arrested, not on the old charges that had sent him to prison before, but on new federal charges, including racketeering, conspiracy, and attempted kidnapping. The evidence was overwhelming, the case airtight. Even his expensive lawyers couldn't find holes in what Haynes had built. Emery's testimony, given in closed court proceedings with full protection, helped seal multiple indictments. She spoke clearly and bravely about her mother's death, about the men who'd come for her, about the fear that had driven her to run. And when it was done, when the last question had been answered and the last document signed, Judge Haynes gave them the news they'd been waiting for. Voss would never walk free again. Minimum sentence 40 years, and given his age and health issues, that effectively meant life. The custody hearing was simpler. The original guardianship agreement, never properly dissolved, gave Willa clear legal standing. A family court judge reviewed the case, interviewed both Willa and Emery separately, and made the permanent guardianship official. Willa Sorn was now legally Willa's daughter. They were offered witness protection, new identities in a new state with federal support for as long as they needed it. Willa almost said yes. The old instinct to run, to hide, to disappear rose up strong, but Emery said no. "I've spent my whole life running," the girl said quietly, sitting in the federal office with Willa and Leonard and Haynes all watching her. "Mom ran, you ran, and look where it got us. I don't want to keep running. I want to go back to the mountain. I want to go home." "Emery, Voss may be in prison, but he still has associates," Haynes started, "who've just watched their boss get destroyed by my testimony and that birth certificate." Emery interrupted. "Who know that coming after me now would bring every federal agency down on their heads? I'm more dangerous to them as a martyr than I ever was as a witness. They'll leave us alone." Willa looked at this girl, this young woman really, and felt pride surge through her. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. That cabin, those mountains, that's where I found you. That's where Mom sent me. That's home now. I'm not letting anyone take that from us." So they went home. The cabin had been searched but not destroyed. Owen had been true to his word, staying there and giving statements that painted Willa and Emery as victims, not criminals. He'd even cleaned up after the federal agents left, restoring order to the chaos they'd created. He was waiting on the porch when they arrived, his green pickup parked in its usual spot. He stood when he saw them, relief clear on his weathered face. "Thought you might not come back," he said. "Almost didn't," Willa admitted. "But somebody convinced me that running doesn't solve everything." Owen looked at Emery, who was surveying the property with proprietorial satisfaction. "Smart girl. She is," Willa agreed. "Owen, this is my daughter, Emery. Emery, this is Owen Breslin, the man who saved our lives by warning us when trouble came." "Just being neighborly," Owen said, but he looked pleased. He shook Emery's hand with formal courtesy. "Welcome home." They settled back into mountain life. But it was different now. Better. Emery enrolled in the local high school, taking the bus down the mountain each morning and returning each afternoon with stories of teachers and classmates and the strange new world of normal teenage life. She made friends slowly at first, then with increasing confidence. Her grades were excellent. She joined the hiking club and taught city kids how to navigate rough terrain. Willa found herself part of a community in ways she'd never allowed before. With Emery came parent-teacher conferences, school events, carpools, and casual conversations with other parents. She let people in. Not fully. Some habits were too ingrained to break completely, but enough. Enough to have coffee with other mothers. Enough to attend high school basketball games. Enough to be seen. Sheriff Hal Greer stopped by regularly, checking in officially at first, but eventually just as a friend. He'd been vindicated in his suspicions about the fake marshal's orders. They'd been convincing forgeries, exactly as Willa had guessed. The investigation into how Voss had managed them had led to the arrest of 2 corrupt officials and sent shockwaves through the system. Winter came, heavy with snow, and Willa taught Emery how to survive it, how to bank fires and ration supplies and read the weather signs. Spring followed with planting and repair work. Summer brought long days of work and longer evenings of conversation on the porch, watching sunsets paint the mountains in gold and purple. One evening, almost a year after Emery had first appeared in the barn, they sat together in comfortable silence. The jade pendant still hung around Emery's neck, catching the fading light. "I think about her sometimes," Emery said. "Mom, I wonder if she can see us now, if she knows we're okay." "I think she knows," Willa said. "I think she sent you to me knowing exactly how it would turn out. She was smarter than either of us gave her credit for." "You don't feel guilty anymore?" "About leaving her?" Willa considered the question honestly. "I'll always carry some guilt. That's the price of the choices I made. But I've forgiven myself for being human, for surviving when I could. And I think Caitlin forgave me too, because she trusted me with you. That's the greatest gift she could have given me. The chance to do better this time. You have done better. You've been amazing, so have you. Your mother would be so proud of the woman you're becoming." Emery leaned her head against Willa's shoulder, and they sat like that until the stars came out. Two women who'd found each other through tragedy and built something good from it. The mountains stood eternal around them, keeping their secrets, witnessing their peace. And in that moment, sitting on a porch as night fell and the world turned gentle, Willa Sorn finally allowed herself to believe that she was home, not just physically, but in every way that mattered. She'd stopped running. She'd found family. She'd made peace with her past and built a future worth living. Sometimes second chances came from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the past you spent years fleeing became the path that led you exactly where you needed to be. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you got to save the one thing that mattered most, not despite your failures, but because of them. The girl in the barn had changed everything. The girl in the barn had saved them both, and every day forward was a gift they'd earned through courage, through choice, through the simple act of refusing to give up. Home wasn't just a place anymore. It was this porch, these mountains, and the daughter sitting beside her in the gathering dark. It was enough. More than enough, it was everything.